Hey guys, we're back again for another lecture video. So today we're going to dive into the Renaissance. And I know that everyone really enjoyed learning about the Middle Ages. I will be honest, the Middle Ages, like I really enjoy the history aspect, learning, all about that and the beginnings of music and kind of seeing how it progressed. But I'm right with most of you. I don't really enjoy the music that much. It's beautiful. I see and hear the importance of it, historically, but yeah, I wouldn't choose to to listen to it on a daily basis either. But then again, you guys probably wouldn't want to listen to all the orchestra music that I listen to. So, eh, you know. But anyway, so with the Renaissance, we're going to continue hearing a lot of choral music, mainly because there's just not a lot of instrumental music yet. And a bunch of the secular stuff, like not sacred, you would see more instruments, and you'll kind of see that in some of the videos that I'm going to share with you. You'll have the same kind of instruments like recorders, the early violins, the lute, things like that, but not the band kind of instruments that we're used to, not really keyboards yet. That's going to come in the next period, the Baroque period. So we'll finally get to that eventually, but this will be a bunch of more choral music. But I think the good thing, we're getting away from chant now. It this is most of it. I think all of the examples, except for maybe one, are polyphonic. I mean, we can just go ahead and say all the examples are polyphonic. So in this chapter, you're going to get a lot more, probably better examples of what polyphony actually is. And in many of the videos that I have in the PowerPoint, you will actually see the vocalists, and then you can kind of see like how the different voices come in and I guess kind of respond to each other and work together. And so it won't just be an oral thing. You'll kind of be able to see it more in this unit, I hope, at least. And if some of you guys are still unsure about polyphony, I mean, I can dig up some more examples, and we can try to continue to you figure things out. But it's not I don't want to say it's not that big of a deal, but like, if you don't get polyphony, it's not like I'm going to fail you because you don't get polyphony. Like, that's not, no. This is just all about being exposed to the different kinds of music from history, and, just knowing what it means. Like, if you can't tell the difference between polyphony and monophony, I mean, I mean, that's fine. I don't care. As long as you turn in the work and put forth effort, I'm all good with it. So don't stress over it if you're not quite sure that, it's not the end of the world if you don't get polyphony. But hopefully by the end of this, you'll at least understand it a little bit more. So I am going to share the screen again, and let's start. Let's see, slideshow. Here we go. No, I don't care about that. All right. All right, here we go. So, Unit 3, Music of the Renaissance. Now, the Middle Ages, such a long span of time. It lasted approximately 1,000 years, give or take a couple hundred. The periods, the eras that we're going to talk about are going to get smaller, like shorter and shorter. So the Renaissance, much shorter than the Middle Ages. It only lasted about 200 years, give or take a few here or there. But there's even though it's shorter, there is a lot of stuff that happens during the Renaissance, a lot more than the Middle Ages. And we'll kind of talk about a bunch of that stuff as we go through this. So these are all the learning objectives. You can read through those. I won't bore you with that. Important people. So Martin Luther, I won't really go too in depth about Martin Luther. You can read about him in the textbook, but most of you guys will recognize that name, know who he is. He was the leader of the Protestant Reformation, forming the Protestant religion, the Protestant sect of Christianity, which is what most of us in America practice. Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, Episcopal, non what do they call it? Non-denominational. Like that all comes from the Protestant Reformation and Martin Luther. And he did actually compose some music. In I think in the textbook it mentions "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God," which is one of it's one of my favorite hymns. It is hugely popular in many different types of churches. You guys can listen to that. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of music if you don't know it already. But I won't really talk about it that much in here. But it's good to know who he was, why he was important, because it does relate to a lot of the other things that we'll talk about. Guillaume Dufay, or Dufay, however you want to say it. He's one that's not in the book, but I add him because he's an important composer, and it'll give you an example of like a different kind of Renaissance music, one that actually includes instruments, and it was meant to include instruments. And it's also a secular piece as well. Josquin des Prez, he's pretty much kind of the master of Renaissance music. Josquin, we pretty much refer to him as Josquin by first name. And yeah, he's considered to be one of the greatest from that time period. Really important composer. Giovanni Luigi, Pier Luigi da Palestrina, we'll just call him Palestrina. Italian composer, really important. We'll talk about him kind of in relation to Martin Luther. Thomas Tallis, he's not in the book, but the book talks about William Byrd and Thomas Wilkes, two English composers, and you can't really talk about those without mentioning Thomas Tallis, because he and William Byrd were kind of like partners for a long period of time before Tallis passed away. So Tallis, Dufay, those are the two that I add and give you examples of. And I think you guys will hopefully enjoy learning about them. So important terms, mainly it's just kind of the different types of music. Anthem, an English style hymn, like kind of the English version of a motet. Chanson is it's a song. And usually it's going to be like a secular song, like so not sacred. Consort, that's a group of instruments. The galliard, the jig or the jig, and the pavane, those are all like dance types of music. We won't really talk much about them, but it's good to know what they are. They were just very common styles of dance and types of music that would have been performed and played during the Renaissance, especially for entertainment. The madrigal, so that's is it sacred? Well, anyway, it's a polyphonic piece of music. The motet also polyphonic. Motets are usually sacred. Madrigals can be either or, secular or sacred. And word painting. We'll talk a little bit about word painting because the music, as you'll see, it gets it gets way more complex in terms of the texture with polyphony, but also in terms of what the composers are trying to do with the music as well, what they're trying to convey. All right, so moving on to the next one, we have our dates, our important events. So in history, the Gutenberg printing press, super important because this makes it easier to print music, to print books, to print everything, and to spread all of this stuff throughout Europe, throughout the world. So this is revolutionary. Like, no longer is music or literature just for the rich, but it can also be for the regular people too. So this was a big revolutionary thing. And you know it really did uh, have a huge impact on music because now, like I said, regular people could buy sheet music and they could learn how to play instruments. Before, you had to be a noble, you had to um be like work at a church, like go study with someone to learn all this stuff. But now you could actually just do it, have music in your own home without hiring a bunch of musicians. So that's just a revolutionary concept. Other things, the fall of Constantinople or Istanbul, whatever your preference is. Columbus reaches America, that's a big thing, even though we don't really like Columbus anymore nowadays. Um, Martin Luther, mentioned him, so his whole counter Protestant Reformation started, kind of halfway through the Renaissance. The next thing, the Council of Trent. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that is really in response to Martin Luther and all of these reformations against the Catholic Church. And then, with the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, it's kind of important to know that the first Queen Elizabeth reigned towards the end of the Renaissance period. Long live the Queen, or God save the Queen, I should say. Um, important events with music. So I just list like Josquin, the piece we're going to listen to, written around 1475. So remember, the C stands for circa. It's approximately around this certain time. You've got other artists like Leonardo da Vinci. He painted the Mona Lisa around 1500. Raphael, Donatello, Michelangelo, all the rest of the Ninja Turtles. They were, well, you, you guys hopefully know they got the names of the Ninja Turtles from these famous artists and philosophers from the Renaissance period. So all of them are alive and doing their thing during the Renaissance period. Palestrina, the piece we're going to listen to in 1563, Shakespeare. He started out towards the end of the Renaissance period, Romeo and Juliet, 1597. And then one of the last pieces we'll talk about by Thomas Weelkes, As Vesta Was Descending, written pretty much at the very end of the Renaissance period, 1601. All right, so those are the kind of important dates. Now, what is the Renaissance? So Renaissance literally means rebirth. So the Middle Ages, I think a lot of this comes from the Catholic Church having so much power and really kind of like in a lot of instances, in a lot of places, the people within the Catholic Church were abusing this power. And they were regulating a lot of stuff, like what people could do, what people could read, all this kind of stuff. And and this was kind of the answer to that. Like they were tired of the Catholic Church, everything just being about the church and the church having so much power that the Renaissance, they wanted to get, I guess, as far away from the church as they could. And that's kind of the whole idea of the Renaissance. The Renaissance is more about humanism, which refers to like nature and things like that. So the focus here, you're going to start to see more of a shift away from like being religion, like sacred heavy, to being more secular. And you're going to, especially in the Baroque, the classical, the Romantic period, you're going to see that a lot of composers aren't just writing music for the church. They're not just writing sacred music. They're writing music about all different kinds of things. And this is, with humanism, it's not just in music, it's in art as well. You can see in the painting that I have on this slide, this is by Raphael, The School of Athens. So the other thing that the Renaissance brought, like not just humanism and more emphasis on the world, the outside world, nature and the human body and all that stuff, but an emphasis on classical wisdom, harking back to ancient Greece, the Roman Empire, all that kind of stuff. So here you have Raphael depicting the School of Athens. And if I'm not mistaken, in here, I think he actually painted some of these people in the likeness of important artists and musicians at the time. Like you should be able to find Leonardo da Vinci in there somewhere, things like that. So people are, trying to go back to, the way things kind of were back then, being more interested in philosophy and all that kind of stuff instead of religion. Um, I mentioned you've got the Catholic Church versus the Protestant Reformation. So the Catholic Church is like, it's still important, it still has a lot of power, but during the Renaissance, it's starting to lose that power. It's starting to split, starting to fracture into many pieces. And the Catholic Church, like it's still, like, I mean, it's still there. Like it's still an important part of culture and history, but starting with the Renaissance, it's not just about the Catholic Church. It's not even just about the church. You just start to see, the shift away from that. Not so much focus on religion. With the feudal system, that's just more about just the landscape of the country changing. You've got all these municipalities and principal areas creating their own governments and things like that. So a lot of the world is starting to change. Not, not completely, but this is starting that shift away from monarchies and all that stuff. It doesn't happen for a couple more 100 years, but this is starting that shift away from that as well. Just a whole lot more creativity, exploration going on. I mean, like I mentioned, you've got Columbus, sailing to America, and you have so many artists, like not just musicians, painters, sculptors. You've got literature, like just so many amazing things happening during the Renaissance. It's just a plethora of knowledge, I guess you could say. And on top of that, you have so many important inventions. I list some of them, but these are like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we already talked about the printing press, but you have other things like the pendulum, which helps, that foresaw the invention of the mechanical clock and all those kinds of things. eyeglasses, telescope, microscope. That's helping to further scientific discoveries. Barometer, thermometer. You've got other things like muskets, cannons, all of these things that are being invented within the span of 200 years. So, I mean, a lot of stuff is just changing rapidly. And you're going to see that more and more, even just in the music, like how much it changed from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, and then also how much it's going to change from the Renaissance to the Baroque and so forth. It's going to take a lot less time for things to change. Now, the last thing, symmetry and perspective, kind of relates more to art, and more of a focus on, again, humanism, like depicting subjects in a human, like in a real way, trying to make paintings actually almost look like you're seeing yourself or in a mirror, or seeing a person like right there, like making things more realistic. That's really what that's about. All right, so let's move on. So some general things about music in the Renaissance of the Renaissance. So hopefully you're going to hear, feel that a lot of this music has more of a steady beat. It has a pulse. It has like actual tempo and structure. Yes, it's very complex. There's lots of polyphony, so there's lots of melodies and things going on in there, but you can do that because everything's structured. It makes it easier for the musicians to perform these really difficult parts because they know where the music is supposed to go. Like they can count the beats, they know when they're supposed to come in, when they're supposed to stop, all those sorts of things. It makes it a lot easier. um let's see, other things like, again, with the structure, balanced phrases. Like with the Middle Ages, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell when something begins and ends, or even if you can tell that, it's just very meandering. Like there's no real shape, consistent shape to the melody. And here in the Renaissance, you have more of that. Like I mentioned, polyphony. Um, so with word painting, this is the increasing interest in text to music relationship. We'll talk about that more later on. Um, it's now the music will sound more similar to what we used to. Composers are starting to use chords like major, minor chords, but not all the time. And then also, the rhythm, the pieces aren't syllabic. They're actually like rhythmic. So they're writing out rhythms. They're notating the rhythms in the music. It's not just related to the text. And like I mentioned, music was no longer limited to the church or the courts. Like the common people were buying music, learning how to play and read music. So that's a big thing. Here's your definitions for word painting, representing poetic images through music, the chanson. So their songs, like I said, secular, usually about love or courtly intrigue. Madrigal, musical piece for several solo voices set to a short poem. These came from Italy. You know, the film Encanto, the family Madrigal, like that's where they got this from. Like I said, madrigals, they can be sacred or secular, really doesn't matter. There are instances of both. And then also, this kind of relates to the humanism thing, where Renaissance composers like to imitate sounds of nature in their music, and then them using other like this and other sound effects just kind of shows the progression of music, like how they went from learning really how to write and compose music to oh, we know how to do it, so let's see how far we can take it. Like that's what this is. The golden age of a cappella music. So yes, not a lot of instruments. I'll talk about that on the next slide. There are plenty of instruments, but most serious composers wrote for a cappella choral groups. So we still have a lot of that. And like I mentioned before, a concert is a group of Renaissance instruments. Now, pertaining to the Renaissance instruments, so this is not all of them. This is just some of the most important ones. Um, the recorder, yes, this is the ancient ancestor to that elementary school torture device. But real recorders are normally made from wood. There are soprano, alto, tenor, bass, lots of different sizes of recorders. And they were used quite often in the Renaissance. One of the videos that you guys will see in the PowerPoint has a recorder in it. The serpent was a very interesting instrument. It's kind of like a really primitive brass instrument. It has a mouthpiece like a brass instrument where you buzz your lips, but the body, it's curved like a serpent. It could be made from wood, from like an animal horn, anything like that. So the sound, because of the material, is a little bit different from a brass instrument, but the concept is there. Now they do have very early trombones. They're called the sackbut. Yes, I know that that name is hilarious, but that's really what they called it. And they're shaped a little bit different, but the concept is there. It has the slide, it has the mouthpiece where you buzz into it. It's essentially a trombone. It's just kind of smaller than a normal trombone, especially the bell part. And at the very end of the PowerPoint, you guys will get to see a consort of sackbuts. So look forward to that. The lute, that's right here. It's the Renaissance Middle Ages guitar. And the VL, that's our Middle Ages Renaissance violin. In towards the end of the Renaissance and in the Baroque, you have the violin, the viola, the cello, and the double bass established as the string instruments. But right now, there's still a lot of different kinds, so we'll just stick with this one, the VL, and the crumb horn. Forgot about that one. The crumb horn, it has an interesting shape. It's made out of wood, but it's like a very early oboe. You can see up here it has a reed there. So it has kind of that oboe duck kind of sound to it. And yeah, just the name is cool. The shape is really interesting. But yeah, I don't think you'll hear a piece with the crumb horn. I mean, you could always Google it just to hear what it sounds like, but these are kind of the main ones. Really, recorder, lute, sackbut, VL. Those are the ones you're going to see examples of. All right, so moving on. First composer is Guillaume Dufay. So he was born around 1400, lived until 1474. So being generous, he was, mid 70s, which again is pretty good age for the Renaissance. So a lot of these composers are going to be classified as Franco-Flemish composers. Now, so this area, it comprises of a few different countries. So it's Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. So those three countries, areas together create the Franco-Flemish area. Because the borders weren't completely established yet, so there's this gray area with that. So that's why we call them Franco-Flemish. But Dufay, I think, was from I think he was born in what would be Belgium, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, he's one of the first important composers of the Renaissance. Um, so he had about 200 surviving works, wrote more, but about 195 actually survived the many years. He worked for a lot of different families, nobles throughout the Franco-Flemish area. The Malatestas of Rimini, the Duke of Savoy, however you want to pronounce it, and the Duke of Burgundy. So, Réveillez-vous um, is a French. Um, it's it, so it's kind of like a dance form, I guess you could say. It is secular. It was written for the Malatesta family, Carlo Malatesta and Vittoria Colonna. They were about to be married, so that's what he wrote this one for. And Colonna was actually the niece of the Pope at the time, Pope Martin V. So this would have been a very advantageous marriage for Carlo, and that was something that was really important, back during the Middle Ages and Renaissance. You want to marry up in the world, not down. So Defy was serving the Malatesta family at the time. Interesting things about this particular piece. So the form is AAB. So you can, as you kind of listen to it, and this one is it's our listening assignment for this unit. And I actually give you the translation of the text, because the song is originally sung in French and it's sung in French in the video. But you have the translation, so you know like what it's actually about, and just see if you can follow the form. See if you can hear the changes or no changes between the AAB form. Just a couple of things. So it has a lot of like rapid, like complex sounding rhythms, and then the vocal melody, like it's not easy, like it's not simple, but it's just a very smooth melody. And in the particular video you guys are going to watch, it's one voice accompanied by three instruments. And originally, the those three, like those other parts, could be performed by other voices. It just kind of depends on what was available at the time. So it really didn't matter. It could be instruments or it could be a cappella. It's just those voices underneath the solo, they wouldn't actually be singing text or singing words. They would just be kind of vocalizing notes. So kind of cool. So I'll let you guys listen to that one, and complete the listening assignment. It's a very, I mean, it's a pretty song. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it. All right, moving on to Josquin des Prez. So Josquin, kind of our most important composer from this period. Very wide range of where they think his date was. So one book says circa 1450. Other books will say circa 1440, sometime in between. So I just put circa 1440 to 1450. We know he died in 1521, so he was somewhere around the age of 70 to 80, which is still pretty good life. He's another Franco-Flemish composer. He was born in what would be Belgium now. Interesting facts: he was a contemporary of both Leonardo da Vinci and Christopher Columbus. And he spent much of his life in Italy, so he actually would have known Da Vinci. Columbus, not so sure about, but maybe. So approximately 157 of his works survived, but I mean, we know he wrote more because he was a very prolific composer, but only 157 survived. Just like with Defy, he served a bunch of different noble families, some really like big families in Italy. The Sforza family of Milan, the Ferrara family, also in Italy. You could think of these kind of like mob families. I mean, these were like the Medici's, like they were powerful families. So yeah, he worked or sang in the papal chapel of Pope Innocent the Eighth, and he also served the King of France, King Louis the XII. So he worked for a lot of interesting people, secular courts, and sacred church with the Church of the Pope. Now, this particular piece we're going to listen to is a sacred piece. It's a motet. So, motets are sacred works for voices, they are polyphonic, and they are typically written in Latin. Like most all of them are written in Latin because they're sacred. This one is Ave Maria, Virgo Serena. So, Hail Mary, Serene Virgin, written about 1485. So it's four parts. You're going to hear a four-part polyphony. So it has distinct soprano, alto, tenor, bass. This is one thing that you didn't really have in the stuff from the Middle Ages. So, this becomes more defined as well, those like register differences. Now, a cool thing, the soprano kind of takes the lead a lot, being the high voice. So at times, each of the other voices, alto, tenor, and bass, will imitate what the soprano does. And this is what we call imitative polyphony. And then sometimes Josquin will pair some of the voices together, kind of having like two duets going on at the same time. Usually it'll be the high voices versus the low, so soprano, alto, and tenor bass. So that's pretty cool too. And with this video, and I'll move on to the next slide so you can see it. This group, Voce 8, I think is the name. They are really awesome. Like they're really, really good. And they even mix up the vocals a little bit, like the high soprano is going to be female, but the alto, I think with this one they have two male singers. With the tenor, I think there's one female, one male, and then the bass, two male. But it's really cool that they mix up the sounds, the different types of voices. So hopefully you guys will hear that, and it should bring like a different color to the piece as well, which should be pretty awesome. Um, in this, and like I said, you'll see it, but just see if you can identify the different parts. See if you can hear the four lines, and then if you notice when they go to like the duets, when the soprano altos are paired together, pay attention to that too. It's more about being able to recognize when this stuff happens than just than being able to go really in depth in explaining all this stuff. So just be aware of those couple of things as you're listening to it. Now the mass, the mass was important. We talked a little bit about it with the Middle Ages. It's still like the Catholic Church is still there. And the mass is still, I mean, that's the service of the church. So there are lots and lots of masses being written. Now, with the Renaissance being very polyphonic, all the music, the composers are just trying to push everything to the extreme, making stuff as polyphonic as possible, as rhythmically complex as possible. So that led to people within the church just kind of getting tired of all this super complex music. Like it was just getting too much for them to handle. And that's one of the reasons why Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation started to happen. It's not the only reason. Like there was a lot of other corruption going on, but it's one of the reasons. And as a result, Martin Luther started like composing a lot of different hymns, like Protestant hymns, like "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God." Things that are still beautiful, but it puts more emphasis on the text rather than a lot of notes, a lot of like different melodies going on at the same time with polyphony. Um, so all right, we also have to talk a little bit about the Council of Trent. So I don't want to go into too much detail because the book talks about it a little bit, but this council spent almost 20 years debating all these different things, trying to reform the Catholic Church to make it stronger. They're trying to reaffirm the authority of the Catholic Church, trying to get rid of some of the abuses of power, the corruption that's going on. Um, they're trying to do all of this stuff, and music comes up because everybody is tired of not being able to recognize the text of the music, not because you can't sing along with polyphony, like it's impossible. It's not like a normal hymn. So they're tired of the fact that they can't really understand the music. It's too much. So the council, they put forth all these ideas. One thing, at first they really want to go all the way back to Gregorian chant, just go back to the simple stuff, and let's move on. Well, obviously, the composers, the musicians, they don't want to do away with all the progress that's been done. So there is a compromise. You can still write using polyphony and stuff, but you just have to make sure that the text is recognizable within the music. So moving on to the next slide. In comes Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina to save the day, like a true Italian. So he was born around 1525, died towards the end of the Renaissance, 1594, lived to be about 70 years old. Like I said, Italian. His career was centered pretty much in Rome. He even served as director of St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, really, not Rome. Well, Vatican in Rome. Anyway, so Palestrina wrote a lot of stuff, over 500 sacred works. Now, in response to the Council of Trent, Palestrina comes in and he says, guys, I can do this. I got this. And he writes the Pope Marcellus Mass in direct response to what the council wants them to do. Basically it's the council saying, show me you can write a polyphonic piece, but with us being able to understand the text, and we'll leave you alone. So that's what Palestrina does. So he spent about a year writing this work. Now the name comes from Pope Marcellus II, who was the Pope while Palestrina sang in the papal choir. The choir has 6 voices. So it's soprano, alto, and then you've got 2 tenors, 2 basses. And it follows the normal, ordinary form of the Mass. You guys are only going to listen to the Kyrie eleison, which is the first movement of the Mass. Now, the polyphonic texture, it's still rich. I mean, you're going to see and hear the texture, like all the different voices and all the different melodies. But he does a very good job of making sure that it doesn't get too heavy. It's you still have a lot of this imitation where the voice parts are imitating each other. but the point was to create a polyphonic work that respects the text, and he does. Now granted, when you guys are listening to it, it's in Latin. I mean, see if you can pick out Kyrie. So you're going to hear a lot of Kyrie eleison, which are the first two words of the Kyrie text. So just see if you can pick those out throughout the piece, because it is repeated multiple times during. Not you guys aren't going to be able to understand the text or really hear it. Just focus on the different parts. um Again, this will just be a practice, and can you recognize that this is polyphony? Like, why is this polyphony? And we'll go from there. Hey, I had to take a little break from recording, but we're going to finish up. So I think I left off with Palestrina. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again. And here we are. So this right here is the slide with the Kyrie from the Pope Marcellus Mass. If I'm not, well, actually, I think this is a different group. I was going to say this was the same group as the one before, but no, I think this is a different one. Interesting thing in this one, so I believe it's an all male group. So the soprano line is going to be sung by a male, a probably somebody that's kind of like a contralto, like a really high male voice. And um it's going to sound a little weird, and he's going to be singing a little bit differently than you normally would. He's going to be using what's called the head voice, or falsetto a lot. So he's not going to be singing from his chest. He's going to be singing more from the head. So think more like nasally sounding. But really, that's what helps guys like get higher in the range without putting too much strain on your voice. So anyway, that's what you're gonna hear in that one. So I hope you enjoy that one. It's a really good piece. So now, sorry, I forgot. It likes to automatically play. I apologize. All right, now moving on. There we go. So we are going to talk a little bit about three different English composers. So, kind of unlike with the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, you have kind of distinct schools of composition based on where people live. You've got Franco Flemish, which is France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And then you also have the English, like I mentioned, you have the Italian. So, you have kind of these schools of composition, these composers in each area that, are popular, write a lot of music. So this is the English school. So I decided to add Thomas Tallis, mainly because of his partnership with William Byrd, who they mention in the textbook. So Thomas Tallis came first. He was born around 1505, lived until 1585. So he was about 80 years old. Again, lived a really long time for way back then. So he was a composer, a singer. He his kind of, I guess, not claim to fame, but he was a member of the Royal Chapel, or Chapel Royal, of the Queen of England or the King of England, whichever. And he became a member of this prestigious ensemble in 1543. And he stayed there until his death in 1585. And he and William Byrd pretty much were kind of the maybe like the co-leaders of the Chapel Royal. And the really interesting thing about both of them is that, William Byrd was a pupil, a student of Thomas Tallis. And Byrd, kind of went away for a little bit, came back. So they were both working together, Byrd and Tallis. And eventually, the Queen of England, Elizabeth I, gave Tallis and Byrd sort of a monopoly on like all the music that was printed and distributed in England. So Tallis and Byrd controlled all of that. They were able to get to have all of their music printed, distributed throughout England and other places. And then they also controlled what music came into England as well, and what was, I guess, performed in England. So, that's pretty significant, to have that much control, that much power to make sure that your music is heard and published. That's really, really important. So on the next slide, and I'll go ahead and show you and come back, you're going to be able to listen to If Ye Love Me, which is by Thomas Tallis. And this video has all of the notes and the words on there for you. So that'll be pretty cool. You getting to see the music as it's being sung as you hear it. This is his most famous work. It's a 4-part polyphonic choral work. It is one of my favorites from this time period. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I just wanted to share that with you, because you can't really, like I said, you can't really talk about William Byrd without mentioning Tallis. And since Byrd was a student of Tallis, there is a really big, heavy influence on him. So Byrd, just like Tallis, lived to be about 80 years old, 1543 to 1623. So he lived kind of into the Baroque era a little bit. Byrd was born in London, one of the most important English composers of all time. He is very well known. Tallis and Byrd, their compositions are still performed in England. Like I mentioned, served with Tallis. Now, his piece, Sing Joyfully Unto God, that one is actually in the textbook. It gives you a little insight about it. He composed it sometime between 1580, 1590. It's an anthem. So, anthem is like the English version of a mass or motet. So, Tallis and Byrd, both of their pieces are in English. You're welcome. So you don't have to listen to a foreign language for this one. But since it's like a mass, like a motet, it is polyphonic. It has word painting, and we'll talk about the word painting specifically in just a moment. But you'll hear a little bit of it in the Byrd, and there's polyphony, like it's very polyphonic. And again, it uses that imitative polyphony where one voice does something, another voice comes in and imitates it. Okay. So the main thing in the Byrd, see if you can hear the imitation, see if you can just latch onto something. Now, this performance of the Byrd is by Voce 8, which is the same group that sang Guillaume Dufay, that first piece that we listened to. So, or no, not Dufay. I think it was Josquin. Sorry, my bad. But anyway, they're a really awesome group. Enjoy listening to them. Now, getting on with sort of the word painting thing. So Thomas Weelkes, he was also mentioned in the textbook. So he was born a little bit later, 1575-ish to 1623, same as William Byrd, but he only lived to be about 50. So here Here we see more like the average lifespan of the Renaissance. They died a lot longer, younger because the medicine was pretty awful. That's a discussion for another day. But Wilkes, um, he composed mostly secular music, mainly madrigals. So this piece has a lot of word painting. Yeah, it says it was written in 1601. Sure, you take the dates literally. This is after the Renaissance, but there's always some spillover. It's organic. It's always it's always changing. But anyway, still Renaissance. This is a choral work. It is very polyphonic, but as I mentioned, this is our true example of word painting. There's a lot of stuff in here. So I give you the text, the complete text down here. And remember, this is Old English. So if you don't understand some of the phrases, that's perfectly fine. Some of it doesn't even make sense to me. So um, take it as you will. But on certain words, like I have ascending, anytime they sing the word ascending, it's going to be notes going up, a scale going up, descending, scale, notes going down. A really cool thing when it goes, it has first two by two, then three by three together, leaving their goddess all alone. Like what Wilkes does there, two by two, he has two voices singing together, three by three, three voices. Then it says together, so it's all six, so 2, 3, 6. And then when it goes goddess all alone, it is one solo voice, which is really cool and very striking because you have all the stuff going on, and then all of a sudden, boom, everything drops out. It's just one person singing, and then everybody comes back in again. So really good example of word painting, and just a good piece of music to listen to. So that is on the next slide. Just see if you can um, hear some of those things that I mentioned in terms of word painting. Now, the last thing, this is just kind of for kicks, just so you can hear something different. But this is by Giovanni Gabrieli, an Italian composer. He and his uncle, I think, Andrea Gabrieli, they were both really big, popular composers in Italy during the last part of the Renaissance, and they both did a lot to kind of establish and promote writing music for instruments, not just voice. So this is one of those that was written for instruments, and you will actually see a real sackbut consort or ensemble, and they are really playing instruments that would have been used back in the late 1500s. So it's really really cool. You'll get to see because they look like trombones at first glance, but then when it gives you a close up on them, then you can kind of tell, oh, they look kind of weird. They look almost like they look small. They look almost like toy trombones, but they are real instruments. They are called the sackbut. I don't know why they chose that name, but it is what it is. um, so Beata es Virgo is the piece of music. There's no text. Just listen to it and enjoy the beauty of the sackbut. And they play in this really beautiful cathedral. So it's an awesome video. But anyway, that concludes the Renaissance unit. Trying to end the slideshow. Anyway, um, yeah, go through, read the text. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I think I covered everything and then some. I mean, this is the longest one, and yeah, just get used to that because there's a lot of stuff to go over in the Baroque, the classical, the romantic, all of that. So I apologize. And really I'm not covering everything that I normally would. So be thankful that I'm just kind of glazing over everything. All right. So anyway, thanks for watching. Sorry that it got so dark. I think it's because of the storm outside. But anyway, I'll see you guys later.